just found this little clearing, so
I've been down here for a few minutes now.
There's something deeply unsettling about realizing your instincts were trying to warn you long before your brain caught up. The woman in this story had only recently moved into a quiet rural area surrounded by thick forests and hiking trails. To her, it felt perfect. No traffic, no loud neighbors, no chaos. Just silence and miles of untouched woods stretching behind her home. Over time, hiking became part of her weekly routine. Every Saturday morning, she would head into the forest alone with her phone, documenting little moments she found beautiful or peaceful. She wasn't posting these videos online or trying to become some outdoor influencer. The recordings were personal. Small memories she wanted to keep for herself. Over the weeks, she discovered hidden creeks, forgotten paths, and areas so isolated they felt almost unreal. The woods became familiar to her, almost comforting. That's what makes what happened next so disturbing. On the day everything changed, she immediately felt different the moment she entered the forest. She couldn't explain why. Nothing looked unusual, nothing sounded obviously threatening, but every noise suddenly felt amplified. Every crack of a branch made her tense up. The deeper she walked into the woods, the stronger that feeling became. She later described it as if her body already understood something her mind didn't. Eventually, she came across a small, swampy clearing hidden deep in the forest. It wasn't particularly beautiful compared to the places she had found before, but for some reason it felt calming, almost like a temporary break from the anxiety that had followed her all day. She pulled out her phone and recorded another short hiking update, casually talking about the clearing and mentioning she was probably going to head toward the public trail soon. At the time, it felt like an ordinary moment, but later that night she would replay that exact video and realize the worst part of the story had already begun before she ever noticed it. And once she saw what was hidden behind her in the trees, the entire day suddenly transformed into something far more terrifying. After leaving the clearing, she eventually made her way back toward the public hiking trails near the local park. By that point, she was already feeling uneasy, but she tried convincing herself she was overreacting. She headed into the public restroom to take a short break before walking back home through the woods. But the moment she stepped back outside, a man immediately approached her. He was wearing a black hoodie, sunglasses, and a purple hat that instantly stood out. What bothered her wasn't just the way he looked, it was how confidently he approached her, almost like he already knew her. He greeted her casually and made an awkward joke about them nearly bumping into each other. She laughed politely and started walking away, hoping the interaction would end there. Instead, she heard footsteps behind her. The man followed her and casually mentioned that they were apparently heading down the same trail together. At that moment, every alarm in her head started going off. She tried to create distance by telling him she was actually waiting for someone. It was a lie, but she hoped it would discourage him. Instead, the man suddenly changed his story. He claimed his car was broken and asked if she could help him open the hood because her fingers were smaller than his. The explanation made no sense. Just seconds earlier, he claimed he was heading down the hiking trail, and now he supposedly needed help with a car that wasn't even nearby. The more he talked, the more obvious it became that something felt seriously wrong. She later admitted that she couldn't tell whether this guy was simply socially awkward or genuinely dangerous, but her instincts kept screaming that she needed to leave immediately. Thankfully, before the situation escalated further, another couple happened to walk by. Without hesitation, she approached them and pretended to know them personally. The woman instantly understood something was off after seeing the panic in her face. Meanwhile, the man in the purple hat lingered nearby awkwardly, almost as if he was trying to figure out whether she was bluffing about knowing them. After a tense minute, he finally gave up, walked toward the parking lot, got into a small red sedan, and drove away. At the time, she believed she had narrowly escaped an uncomfortable encounter with a creepy stranger, but hours later, she realized this man had likely been watching her long before they ever spoke. Later that night, after finally making it home, she tried calming herself down by going through the videos and pictures she had recorded during the hike. At first, it was just another normal routine. She wanted to relax and forget the bizarre interaction from earlier that day. But then something caught her attention while replaying the short video she filmed in the swamp clearing. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her, so she paused the clip and replayed it again, and then she saw him. Standing partially hidden behind the trees in the background was the same man from the bathroom. The purple hat was unmistakable. Her heart immediately dropped. Until that moment, she believed the encounter at the public trail was random, but now she realized something far worse. The man had already been deep in the woods watching her before she ever reached the public area. Suddenly, every strange feeling she had earlier that day started making sense. The anxiety, the paranoia, the constant sensation that someone was nearby. She began asking herself terrifying questions she couldn't answer. How long had he been following her? Had he been silently watching her hike alone through the forest for hours? Did he know where she lived, since she often entered the woods from the same private path near her house? The realization completely shattered her sense of safety. What frightened her most wasn't even the interaction itself anymore. It was the possibility that she only survived because that random couple happened to walk by at the perfect moment. The more she replayed the conversation in her mind, the more disturbing his behavior became. He tried isolating her. He tried getting her near his car. He lied repeatedly, and now she had proof he had already been lurking in the woods behind her long before approaching her publicly. Panicking, she contacted the police and explained everything, including the video footage. Authorities searched the area and reportedly investigated the situation, but as far as she knows, they never identified the man. After that experience, she stopped hiking alone entirely. Eventually, she moved away from the area altogether. Even years later, she still thinks about how close she may have come to becoming another missing person story hidden somewhere deep in those woods. And the most horrifying part is that if she never rewatched that short, harmless-looking video, she may never have realized just how much danger she was truly in that day. The next story starts with something that sounded completely ridiculous at first. A man named Ron had recently moved into a new home with his wife, Tina. On paper, everything about the house seemed perfect. Quiet neighborhood, affordable price, enough space for a fresh start. The only unusual detail was that someone had previously passed away inside the house, something the real estate agent had disclosed before the sale. Ron initially brushed it off because he didn't believe in ghosts or paranormal activity. But after living there for a while, strange things started happening almost every night. Ron and Tina would wake up hearing noises throughout the house, not normal house sounds either. According to Ron, it sounded like furniture moving or objects being knocked over. Sometimes they would wake up the next morning and notice things slightly out of place. Items left on the kitchen counter would suddenly be gone or moved to different rooms entirely. One night, Ron's favorite Miami Dolphins coffee mug disappeared without explanation. The deeper this went, the more paranoid Tina became. Eventually, she convinced herself the house was haunted by whoever died there years earlier. Ron tried to stay rational at first, but things escalated after he heard a loud crashing sound come from the basement late one night. Terrified but desperate for answers, he went downstairs to investigate. The basement was cluttered with storage boxes, making it impossible to see clearly into every corner. But according to Ron, while standing down there in the dark, he saw movement somewhere in the room. That single moment completely broke him psychologically. After that night, he became convinced something was hiding in the basement. By the time he told his friend this story over drinks, he was exhausted, emotional, and barely sleeping anymore. Tina had become even worse. She reportedly refused to go near the basement entirely and started treating the situation like a real haunting. Hotels replaced nights at home because neither of them felt safe inside their own house anymore. The narrator listening to this story thought the entire situation sounded insane. To him, this was just two terrified people convincing themselves paranormal activity was real because they already knew someone died there. So, trying to prove them wrong once and for all, he offered to investigate the basement personally. He joked that he would go downstairs and prove there were no ghosts hiding in the dark. But the second he entered that basement, the entire story stopped being funny.
When the narrator finally arrived at Ron's house, the atmosphere already felt strange. Not supernatural, but uncomfortable. The house smelled terrible, almost like heavy body odor lingering in the air. Ron refused to enter the basement himself and waited outside while the narrator went in alone. Confident there was nothing paranormal happening, he even mocked the entire situation before going downstairs. He joked about antagonizing the imaginary ghost just to prove spirits weren't real. At first, the basement looked exactly how Ron described it. Stacks of storage boxes crowded the room, creating endless dark corners and hidden spaces. Wanting to tease Ron later, the narrator pulled out his phone and started recording a sarcastic video about how there were no monsters or demons hiding downstairs. While recording in selfie mode, he casually turned the camera to show the basement behind him, and that's when everything changed instantly. Sitting silently in the darkness behind him was an elderly man staring directly at him. Not a ghost, not some hallucination, a real human being. The narrator immediately stopped recording and ran upstairs in panic before the old man could even fully react. He slammed the basement door shut and physically held it closed while calling Ron and screaming for him to contact the police. On the other side of the door, the old man started screaming violently and attempting to force the door open. The narrator described the sound as almost animal-like, mixed with repeated desperate cries of no, 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 over and over again. For nearly 10 minutes, he struggled to hold the basement door shut while waiting for a authorities to arrive. Then, just as police finally pulled up outside, he accidentally let go of the door too early. The old man burst out of the basement and came face to face with him. He described the man's eyes as looking almost plastic and inhuman from fear and exhaustion. The old man screamed directly in his face before sprinting through the house and escaping out the back door before police could catch him. When officers later searched the basement, they discovered evidence that the man had secretly been living down there for an unknown amount of time. There was a small blanket, a pillow, and stolen household items, including Ron's missing coffee mug. Suddenly, every paranormal event had a horrifying, real explanation. The noises weren't ghosts. Someone was physically walking around the house while Ron and Tina slept upstairs, completely unaware. Even worse, investigators realized the man likely entered because Tina frequently forgot to lock the doors at night. For weeks, maybe months, a stranger had been silently living beneath them while they convinced themselves the house was haunted. And honestly, the real explanation turned out far more terrifying than any ghost story ever could.
The final story begins quietly, which honestly makes it even more disturbing. A man agreed to house sit and dog sit for his wealthy boss while he was away for a few days. The job sounded easy. The neighborhood was expensive, peaceful, and considered extremely safe. His boss's dog, Max, was calm and friendly, and aside from struggling to sleep in unfamiliar places, everything seemed normal during the first night. But on the second evening, while walking Max around the neighborhood after dark, he noticed what looked like a person standing near the house. Because it was dark, he couldn't clearly make out the figure, and by the time he got closer, nobody seemed to be there anymore. He convinced himself the darkness was playing tricks on him. Later that night, around 1 a.m, he went outside briefly to grab something from his car and noticed another figure standing a few houses away, dressed entirely in black. What made it unsettling wasn't that someone was outside late at night. It was the fact they were completely motionless, simply standing there, watching silently. He tried rationalizing it. Maybe it was just a neighbor outside getting fresh air. Maybe someone was stargazing. But deep down, something about the situation felt wrong. After returning inside, he stayed awake for hours playing video games and scrolling through his phone until strange noises outside started making him anxious. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him, and he looked through the living room window. The second he did, someone immediately ran away from the house. His adrenaline exploded instantly. Now it was obvious someone had been standing close enough to peer directly inside. Even then, he still didn't call the police. Looking back, he admitted this was probably a massive mistake. The next day, his boss casually explained that local teenagers often cut through the yard and sometimes played harmless pranks in the neighborhood. That explanation temporarily calmed him down, but the following night, the figure returned again. This time, there was no doubt somebody was standing outside the property watching the house. And the longer the encounters continued, the more it stopped feeling like random teenagers messing around and started feeling like deliberate stalking. By the third encounter, the tension had completely escalated. While returning from another late-night walk with Max, he once again spotted the figure standing near the property. But this time, when he approached, the person suddenly disappeared behind the house. Frustrated and convinced someone was messing with him intentionally, he grabbed a flashlight and searched around the backyard, trying to scare whoever it was. He found nothing. Still believing this might just be some elaborate prank, he locked the house and tried moving on with his night. But hours later, unable to shake the anxiety, he looked out the front window again. There, standing beneath a streetlight across from the house, was the same figure, completely motionless, just staring toward the property without moving an inch. The silence of the situation started feeling almost surreal. Eventually, he made the decision that nearly got him hurt. Wanting proof for his boss and hoping to scare the person away, he walked outside and started calling out to them. He asked if they needed help and announced he was recording them on his phone. For several seconds, the figure didn't react at all. Then suddenly, without warning, the person charged directly at him at full speed, not jogging, not trying to intimidate him casually, sprinting aggressively toward him through the darkness. Panic instantly took over, and he ran back inside the house, locking the door behind him seconds before the person reached it. At first, everything outside became silent again. Then, the doorbell rang. He froze completely. The bell rang a second time before the stranger calmly tested the door handle. Thankfully, it was locked. And then came the part that disturbed him more than the chase itself. In a completely calm voice, the stranger simply said, "Have a good night." That sudden shift from violent pursuit to polite calmness felt deeply wrong. He later described it as sounding less like a prank and more like someone playing with him psychologically. Eventually, he contacted police and showed them the footage he captured before the chase. Even then, authorities couldn't do much beyond patrol the area temporarily. When his boss finally returned home and saw the video, he immediately confirmed one thing. That person was definitely not one of the neighborhood teenagers. To this day, nobody knows who the figure was, why they targeted him specifically, or what would have happened if he hadn't made it back inside in time. And honestly, that uncertainty may be the scariest part of the entire story.